Hello. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Westside congregation in Rio Rancho. Thank you for joining us in our continuing online services during the COVID-19 pandemic. I am the Reverend Dr. Nancy Hitt, Consulting Minister for this congregation. I am delighted to share with you today that we will be joined later in our service by Bram Cast Hecht for our Animal Ministry moment and by Carol Eaglehart with the UU pandemic hymn, Kindred, We Now Meet to Worship. Both Bram and Carol have contributed video clips from home that Jimmy has added to our service. We look forward to having them and others join us in a variety of ways in the future as state regulations adapt to changing health needs. Our service today is titled Fear, Grief, and the American Way. We will be exploring the various responses that people have experienced to the pandemic, to its protocol, and outlining possibilities for a new vision of life as we know it, with hope and confidence. It is based on Principle 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and sources 2 and 3, words and deeds of prophetic women and men which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love, and wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. It is our hope that today's program will support your personal search for those values in your own life. We also extend our thanks to Jimmy Stevens for recording, editing, and posting our video to our website and to YouTube, and to Steve for manning our music and updating us on our board's most recent meeting. If you have never attended Westside, we welcome you. If you have questions or comments, please email the office at office@uuwestside.org. We hope to be able to meet in person when on-site services become a viable option. In a moment, Steve, your board president, and I will do-si-do at a socially safe 6-foot distance so that he can share the work that your board has been doing with you. I will follow up with a few announcements after that.
Morning. Happy Sunday, UUWC. As board president, I thought it was my responsibility to brief you on a few decisions your elected board agreed on last Sunday's meeting. First, we're all concerned about COVID-19 and have been monitoring both our governor's guidance and the UUA's recommendations. It looks like New Mexico is in the process of slowly opening up. However, the board voted unanimously to follow the UUA's recommendation to temporarily postpone in-person services until May 2021-ish. We will be continuing these awesome weekly video recordings until then. But the board will meet again on August 23rd and December 13th to reevaluate and discuss plans for our congregation. We will only open to in-person services if local COVID-19 conditions have improved enough so we can meet without jeopardizing the health of our UUWC family. Additionally, the board was informed of a congressional interest in establishing a robust website presence with additional features to help our folks stay connected in a meaningful way. As with any important endeavor, we need volunteers to come up with ideas. So if you have thoughts on how to increase our internet footprint and are willing to follow through, please reach out to Nancy or one of your board members. Finally, the board discussed starting quarterly town hall meetings via Zoom, with the first meeting scheduled for noon on Sunday, July 12th. Please keep an eye on your email for details and instructions. Thanks for your time, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. In regard to that robust website development team, I want to say that if you have never attended a Zoom event before, that is not a problem. It's really very simple, as evidenced by the fact that I can do it. And it's even a little bit fun. If you have audio but no video on your computer, that's okay too. You can still click the link that I will send you and participate in the meeting. You will be able to speak and to hear what others say, even if you don't have video and cannot be seen. Lastly, I will be sending out an email to all of our members and friends with the mailing addresses of several of our people who are in long-term care and would appreciate cards. Please consider sending a quick note or a funny card off to them if you can. It helps to mitigate the isolation of both long-term care and the pandemic. Shalom. If you have a personal chalice or candle that you would like to light as we move into that part of our service, draw it closer to you now. Please join me in the words of our chalice lighting as they appear before you on your screen. In dark and troubling times, light has always found a way to comfort, to heal, and to inspire. As we light our chalice flame, we open our hearts and minds to that great process in our own lives and in our world. Shalom and blessed be. Please join me now in affirming our aspirations as those words appear on the screen before you. Life is a gift. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Blessed be. I invite you now to sit back wherever you are and to relax into your surroundings. Close your eyes gently or keep them open as you prefer. And begin to focus on your breathing. Breathing in deeply and fully, and then out, releasing tension and pent-up energy as you exhale. Let your mind go blank, knowing you can return to anything you need to later. For now, focus on the horizon, that liminal place out in the distance where light and darkness meet, and images take shape and form, hovering at the edge of awareness. Gaze at your horizon in peace, knowing that when you are ready for them, new images of purpose will form. For as long as the horizon is open, simply relax into its receptive peace. As new images of potential arise, examine them. Accept them as possibilities. Tuck them into a comfortable place in your mind's eye. know that you can examine them at your leisure later. And begin to return your focus to your breathing, slowly, deeply, and then return your awareness to the here and now. And when you are ready, open your eyes. Shalom. I invite you now to draw your personal joys and concerns candle closer to you, being careful to maintain fire safety. I will offer a meditation for us all and then invite us to light our candles together. Our joys and concerns are intricately entwined today. We are aware of much grief and tragedy in the course of the pandemic. Our nation hit 100,000 deaths this week. That is not a milestone we ever wanted to see. For all who are grieving the loss of loved ones, those who have died from the virus, and those who have died from other causes, we hold concern. We hold concern about the stress of change and the loss of familiar ways of life that once held meaning and purpose for us. We hold concern for those whose mental health is stressed from the realities of the pandemic. We hold concern for the mental health systems in our nation that were never prepared for the onslaught of need they are encountering. As state regulations step down controls and people are able to move about more, we hold both joy and concern. We rejoice in the return of work and economic opportunity. We remain deeply concerned about the continued health of our nation's people and businesses that are struggling or already closed. We hope for healing in the divisions we've encountered as part of the pandemic. We hope for the rebuilding of an economy that will sustain and meet the needs of all citizens. We hope for leadership at local, state, and national levels that will bring our nation together in justice and in liberty for all. Together, may we all find new ways of being together that affirm each other in our individuality and in our community. May we envision a better world rising out of the pandemic chaos, and may we be moved to create it through our own lives. For all of this, for all that our hearts and minds still hold, let us light our candles together.
Hi, this is Bram, and I'm here to read you the Animal Ministry Moment poems, and this is called Don't Let Your Troubles Weigh You Down. And there's a picture of the dog on the scale. There it is. And it says, you always have a choice to either step lightly or sadly shuffle along. Look on the light side and your burdens won't feel so weighty. Whether you're a St. Bernard or a Yorkshire Terrier, only gravity can hold you down. Your spirits can always soar. Now the second poem is called Throw the Darn Ball. And here's a picture of the little dog with the ball. And it says, why do you abuse me? You throw it, then confuse me. It's tiresome the way you mimic a toss. What's the point of pointing out who's boss? Please don't tease me. Why do you stall? God darn it, you human, just throw the ball.
Our moment for all ages today is titled Words of Fear. We're going to be talking a lot about fear today, so I think it makes sense to explore some of the kinds of fear that exist in our world. Your vocabulary is about to grow in some probably surprising ways. Please note that these fears are very real to people suffering from them, even if we are surprised by laughter when first hearing them. Some of them you are likely to be familiar with, others not. They are all real. Since we will be consulting with scientific experts, we will use clinical language. A fear that affects us repeatedly to our detriment is called a phobia. The American Psychiatric Association identifies 3 different categories of phobias: social phobias, agoraphobia, and specific phobias. When people talk about having a phobia of a specific object, like snakes or spiders or needles, they are referring to a specific phobia. 1 in 10 Americans has a diagnosed phobia. That's a lot of people. So here are the top 10 most common phobias. First, we have glossophobia, the fear of public speaking. And then necrophobia, the fear of death. Then arachnophobia, the fear of spiders, which also makes for an excellent movie. And then there is acluophobia, the fear of darkness. And acrophobia, the fear of heights. Sociophobia, the fear of people or social institutions. Aerophobia is the fear of flying. Claustrophobia, the fear of confined spaces. Agoraphobia, the fear of open spaces. And astrophobia, the fear of thunder and lightning. Now, many of those you are probably familiar with. Here are 10 of the most unusual fears or phobias. How about electorophobia? It's the fear of chickens. Metrophobia is the fear of poetry or rhyming verse. Ephebophobia is the fear of youths, aka teenagers. Ergasiophobia is the fear of work. Optophobia is the fear of opening your eyes. Neophobia is the fear of newness. Anthophobia is a fear of flowers. Tyrannophobia is the fear of being tickled by feathers. Vestiphobia is a fear of clothing. And phrenomenophobia is the fear of thinking. And then to wrap it all up, there is my personal favorite, phobophobia, a phobia of phobias. You can see from these lists, which are hardly exhaustive, there are over 100 clinical categories for phobia or fear of something. That there are a lot of things that people find themselves afraid of. This experience of fear does not depend on any sort of rational process to justify or validate it. For the person who is suffering from that fear, it is very real and very painful, even, or perhaps especially, if no one else around them is experiencing the same fear. Many of these are manageable or avoidable. You can sort of avoid being tickled by feathers or chickens or whatever. but many of them are not. All are real for the person who has them. All can be treated and responded to with compassion by others. So no matter how startling or puzzling you may find another person's fear, affirm their inherent worth and dignity first and foremost. Then move on to treating them with justice, equity, and compassion, despite their phobia. Shalom. Oddly enough, and I did really search hard for this, I found no word for the fear of losing one's spiritual community, something that we confront each week as we balance our budget. I am relieved to be able to say that we are still solvent. Westside is able to pay its bills at present. I am also concerned to report that our income is slowing down. If we are to continue to be a vital congregation, we will need to continue to fund ourselves through the pandemic. Thank you to everyone who has either mailed their pledge or financial contribution to Post Office Box 15146 in Rio Rancho, or use the PayPal button on our website. Our facility needs to be maintained even while we are not in it, so that it will be available for us to return to. Thank you for making this possible. Please listen now as Carol shares a video of the UU coronavirus hymn, Kindred We Now Meet to Worship. You will have received the lyrics in the church email if you would like to sing along.
Hi, the words to this song were written by Tommy Snell, who's the music director at the First Unitarian Church of Rochester. Kindred, we now meet to worship, reaching out through screen and phone. Though we dwell in isolation, we don't have to be alone. Worshiping beyond our building, our connections no less real. Though we cannot meet in person, covenant unites us still. Siblings share a song of gladness, lifting spirits, spreading cheer, so that in these days of sadness we won't be consumed by fear. In this time of mass confusion, sickness, loss, and overwhelm, let's encourage one another, hands not joined but hearts are held. Friends, be gentle with each other, there's so much we're going through. May this be a time for healing, holding space for grieving too. Bodies, minds, and hearts are weary, anguish fills the aching soul. But we know with perseverance, broken hearts can be made whole.
Thank you, Carol. One of the critiques leveled by those who are protesting pandemic protocols is that the responses of wearing masks and social distancing are based on fear. In return, those on the other side of the fence point out that unmasked protesters demanding liberty are also motivated by fear. The difference between the two groups is apparently the source of their fear. While one group fears a virus, the other fears governmental involvement. In the end, both groups are equally scornful of fear. Each points to the source of the other's fear with derision and scorn. They themselves would never be scared of what the other side is. Their own concern or caution is founded on hard reality-based fact. Actually, both groups are factual to a point. It is the meaning they make of the facts that they admit to that differs so dramatically. What they have in common, despite their resistance to each other, is that their motivation is fear. As you heard from the rather intriguing list of phobias that we reviewed, fear takes many forms. I chose to review the APA's explanation of fears and phobias as a national phenomenon because it highlights so clearly that our culture regards fear as a disease. Like anything else taken to an extreme, fear presenting as a clinical phobia compromises life. It renders the person suffering from it incapable of healthy, constructive responses to the object of their fear. Lack of capacity for a healthy response means that we are sick. And if we are sick, others don't have to take our condition personally. We can be officially treated for our illness and our lives will be free of it. Except that fear is a part of every human life. At least it is if we're paying attention. Fear has a purpose. Its purpose is to protect us. Here is a comprehensive and short discussion of the purpose of fear. Fear is a feeling induced by perceived danger or threat that occurs in certain types of organisms, which causes a change in metabolic and organ function, and ultimately a change in behavior, such as fleeing, hiding, or freezing from perceived traumatic events. Fear in human beings may occur in response to a certain stimulus occurring in the present or in anticipation of a future threat perceived as a risk to oneself. The fear response arises from the perception of danger leading to confrontation with or escape from and avoiding the threat, which in extreme cases of fear can be a freeze response or paralysis. Fear has a biological basis. It affects our entire physiology, changing our breathing, our heart rate, our hormone secretion, our muscle activity, and of course, our thought process. The biggest difficulty in responding to fear is found in the first line of that description, in which it says, it is induced by a perceived danger or threat. In order to feel fear, we have to be paying attention. And when we are vulnerable to feeling fear in a way that may or may not be realistic or actually work for us in the long run. It's all about perception. This is a problem. Any sufferer of an actual phobia or PTSD flashback can tell you that it is hell being afraid all the time, especially if others don't perceive the same danger that you do. You end up feeling very unsupported and outside the social norm in ways that are isolating and crippling. Without compassionate help, life can be overruled by fear. Right now, our entire planet is actively engaged in responding appropriately to the coronavirus that we have learned to fear. It may only be a microscopic piece of protein with a funky, spiky design, but its impact on humanity as a species can be deadly. It also came out of left field, startling us with its existence and its power over human life. We pretty much didn't know it even existed until it was too late to contain it. We've been playing catch-up ever since. Part of our realistic response to the activity of the virus has been fear. Fear that life will be over for huge numbers of people if the virus is not contained. Fear that containment measures will further compromise life as we know it, diminishing economic security, interrupting education, leisure pursuit of fun, interpersonal relationships, family, friends, and community. The virus has called the question on the meaning and purpose of our lives. Does life still have meaning if we're restricted to our own housing units? If we cannot be with people we used to work with and socialize with and worship with? Is there any purpose left to our lives if we stop doing almost everything that we used to do and the world goes on anyway without our former contribution seeming to matter at all? Even if we weren't afraid of the virus based on its effect on the life and death of our personal bodies, we should definitely be afraid by now. The effect of the pandemic protocol in our nation has been devastating. Mental health needs have mushroomed beyond our capacity to cope with them. People are experiencing higher levels of depression and suicidality. Clinics are closed, and there were never enough mental health practitioners to supply necessary care to those in need before the pandemic, so the availability of services is even worse now. And as always, if you're poor, out of work, homeless, or otherwise unable to pay for these services, you probably can't get them. In this country, health care, perhaps especially mental health care, is a privilege of the adequately funded. The bottom line is that it's extremely normal right now to feel anxious, apprehensive, or nervous, with no specific apparent danger on the horizon other than the pandemic. The words anxious, apprehensive, nervous, or having the creeps, the jitters, the willies, or a qualm, a pang, or a twinge, or feeling agitation or consternation, or to be perturbed or faint-hearted, dismayed or worried. They're all just more words for fear. Sometimes using a different word camouflages our feelings from ourselves so that we can bear it. Right now, it is a rare person who is experiencing none of these. Even those of us who are coping well with the pandemic are experiencing these feelings. Which brings us to grief. Sometimes almost inextricable with fear, grief has a powerful hold on us. And while people suffer when they are grieving, we customarily expect it to be a temporarily intense circumstance that will resolve over time and leave us healed, and perhaps with greater wisdom and insight. Grief, like fear, has a purpose in our lives. It helps to preserve a permanent memory of a loss. Randolph Ness, a psychiatrist and director of the Center for Evolution and Medicine at Arizona State University, says that grief is a specialized form of sadness to help us cope with a life-altering event. That certainly sounds like an appropriate response to the pandemic. Whether we are sick or healthy, Whether our immediate community is unscathed or mourning those who have died, the pandemic is a life-altering event. While fear primes us for flight, fight, or freezing in response to danger, grief is understood to be a process that eventually helps us adapt and return to a healthy life that incorporates our loss meaningfully. And we have all suffered loss in this pandemic. We have lost education and work and play. We have lost our spiritual communities. We have lost the immediacy of face-to-face interaction with people we know and love. We have lost events we used to think of as deeply meaningful and important in our lives. Graduations, weddings, funerals, celebrating new births, birthdays of all ages, getting one's driver's license, moving to a new home, finding a new job, taking a vacation. All of these things and many more have been suspended at the least or lost completely due to the pandemic. The very air we breathe is thick with grief and fear. Together, grief and fear are an immobilizing pair. Both have profound physiologic symptoms. They affect our energy level, our ability to concentrate, our appetite, our ability to sleep. They inhibit our appreciation of life itself. They also, both fear and grief, restrict our awareness to our own personal bubble. It's very hard to raise your eyes and take in a world-view perspective on anything when you're filled with fear or you're grieving. Our capacity to do pretty much anything is compromised by grief and fear. We're left feeling aimless and lifeless if we're not cowering in a corner looking for safety. While that is hardly an exhaustive description of what we're living with these days, I gotta tell you, I'm exhausted just listing it out. Part of the reality of the pandemic is coming to terms with these aspects of reality. Life has changed, and we never saw it coming. Many of our cherished beliefs about our lives, about who we are as individuals and as a species, have been challenged. Things will never go back to being exactly the same again. Whatever normal is, it has changed, and no one knows exactly what that's going to be. We love predictions based on statistics. They make us feel secure. Except not now, because they're all predicting radical changes that we have trouble envisioning. The loss of whatever normal used to mean is huge. We're going to feel that and grieve that for some time. But now what? What do we do once we've admitted that we're afraid and we're grieving? We often hesitate to admit to such a thing because we think it will do two negative things. It will become a self-fulfilling prophecy and perpetuate itself, and it will make us look vulnerable to others. Newsflash, people, we are all in this together. No one consciously engineered this pandemic or deliberately planned to compound the trauma by putting public health safety protocols in place to deepen or accentuate our losses. No single person is in charge of it. Here's another set of truths. First, Life is always a risky business with no guarantees. Floods, plagues, fires, earthquakes, they all happen regularly, without rhyme or reason. Same thing with car accidents and crimes, too. The fact is that life is not safe. It never was. Mostly, we just block that inconvenient truth so that we can function without crippling anxiety from day to day. In this regard, though, the pandemic is nothing new. We're always at risk. And we've been here before. Not with the COVID-19 virus, but with others. The flu pandemic of 1918, historically the bubonic plague of 1347, and others. And each time, humanity prevailed. We learned how to contain the contagion. We adapted economic and social practices accordingly. It wasn't fun, but we survived. We can do it again now. We've also been at risk from other threats to our existence and our sense of ourselves also. Think World Wars I and II and how they affected the life of our nation. It was perhaps easier because we saw ourselves in a heroic role fighting a visible enemy. But the fear and grief and the devastation to our nation's way of life was extreme. We've done this before. We can do it again. However, it is a choice. And while we might think it's automatically easiest and best to be determined to heal and revision our lives, sadly, that isn't necessarily so. We humans are often tempted to scapegoat someone or something to relieve ourselves of unbearable tension. Right now, our country is poised on the brink of an election that was never going to be smooth, but now looks like an obligation to keep conflict going for years. We can back off, away from those who don't think as we do, and blame them and their ridiculous ideals for the controversy. Blaming others always makes us feel better about ourselves. Or we could set aside our whining and blaming and resist the opportunity to exempt ourselves from meaningful participation. We could step up and grow. We've done it before. People stepped up when we were at war and did things they never thought they'd do before. We can step up and intentionally support one another and build and rebuild community together. We could resist the impulse to blame China or the governor or people with or without masks. We could take responsibility for ourselves and the world we want to create and get on with it. I really do believe that. I also know that it's very hard to do that when fear and grief are the order of the day. But I look at our nation's history and I see pioneers and inventors, and I see Rosie the Riveter and victory gardens, and I see unions and public school and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration and free libraries and more, so much more, that gives me hope. And that's what we need, hope. Hope is the antidote to both fear and grief. It doesn't make them disappear, but it changes everything. Here's one description of how hope works. Hope is a belief in a positive outcome related to events and circumstances in one's life. Hope implies a certain amount of perseverance, That is, believing that a positive outcome is possible even when there is some evidence to the contrary. Hope is a mixture of positivity and resolve. Hope makes it happen. It has the ability to self-perpetuate. So the question for us now is, how do we hope? Remember, hope was the last reality to escape out of Pandora's box. All of the evils of the world made a break for it first. Hope only arrived when the need for it did. Like a lot of other things, hope is a choice. It's something we envision and encourage in ourselves and in each other. It doesn't just arrive in the night and fix our insomnia. We have to select it out of a host of other options. And honestly, many of those other options, like hating, blaming, scapegoating your enemy, they will work for a while. They will fill you with energy and focus for your wrath and make you feel pretty good in a self-righteous sort of way. And they will also leave you flat, or worse, when they fail you, because they've made no change in the way that things really are. But hope enables change. It lets us create new ways of being, dream new realities into our world. Warring powers looking to oppress people never encourage hope. It's too powerful. It's uncontrollable. Hope changes everything. Even when driven underground, it comes popping up in unexpected places like the tunnels under the Berlin Wall once did. Hope brings life. Not realistic, you say? Too overwhelmed to hope for anything right now? I beg to differ. We can do this. Here are 10 strategies we can use to find hope in our own lives. You can decide to release fear and grief. Refuse to let them define you. Choose hope. You can allow yourself to dream of what you would like to be and to do with no limits whatsoever. Do what you can, one step at a time, and be glad to count small steps. Identify the things in your life that you are in control of. Affirm them. Take up journaling as a way of maintaining perspective in your life. Make sure you name a positive for every negative. Strive for balance in your perspective. Choose to be kind, all the time, to everyone, whether you like or agree with them or not. It will leave you feeling good about yourself. Name 3 things that have happened to you that are good in each day. Try to share them with someone out loud or online. Remind yourself that hope is free. You can afford to hope for a new and amazing future. Accept risk as a fact of life and live it anyway. Security is an illusion. Enjoy it, but don't depend on it. Share your hopes with others. Work together to support theirs and yours. You see, it turns out it's not that hard after all. We can repair, revision, and renovate pretty much everything if we allow ourselves to hope. Our nation, our congregation, our life in a post-pandemic world, all need to be regarded with hope. Like the little engine that could, we can marshal our resolve and let hope mitigate our fear and our grief. We've done it before. We can do it now. It's the American way. We hope for a better future, and we work toward it. Shalom and amen. Once again, I invite you to respond to our service either through the comment section below the video on our website or by emailing me directly at ministeruuwc@gmail.com. We appreciate your remarks about both our service format and its content. I invite you now to pull your chalice or candle closer and join me in speaking the words that appear on your screen as we extinguish our flames together. Though extinguished from sight, our chalice flame still enlightens us from the inside out as it resides in our hearts. Together, may we find our way through our fears, find comfort despite grief, and may we be inspired to find new ways of being in community together. Shalom and amen. Fear not. The message of the universe is that life goes on. Embrace yours in all of its unexpected challenges and changes and opportunities. Make of it something uniquely you. Go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you wherever you may go, whoever you are with, however you have need. Shalom and blessed be.